All right, everybody, Folks Tans here. Welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I kind of want to have a let's talk about gun safety with loaded and unloaded mags. In the past few videos, you've seen me with this firearm practice holster training with a loaded magazine. And there's a reason for that for me personally, but the disclaimer I do want to make for people watching is that you need to really know your firearm safety features and mechanics if you're going to do this. This is not something that I suggest everyone do, especially if you have a problem with trigger. If you have a itchy trigger finger, I really don't think you should be using any firearm until you get proper training and then muscle memory on when and when not to use that trigger. I'm going to open up this bag here because I have multiple empty 5.7 mags in here. I'm going to pull one out. So how I go about my day before I begin any kind of like firearms training is I rack the slide to make sure there's no bullet in the chamber. You got to make sure there's no bullet in there. And I have a couple of definitions versus loaded, unloaded, fully unloaded. And in my fully unloaded version, or what I call to be fully unloaded, would be a gun that doesn't have a bullet in the chamber, or there's no magazine in the magazine well. This to me is fully unloaded. It is super safe to shoot because you can't. It's impossible to accidental discharge with this firearm. Nothing to feed it. What I call unloaded is having an empty magazine in a non-chambered barrel, and it'll look like this. This would be unloaded. Fully unloaded, unloaded. Remember, you also need to check to make sure that there's no bullet in the chamber. Unloaded, fully unloaded. You also notice, just as I point out, with a unloaded magazine for the 5.7, the magazine, if you have it tilted sideways, doesn't actually release all the way due to the weight. So if you want it to fall out, you got to turn it upright to make it fall out. See the difference? It's not like that with a loaded magazine. All right, so we're fully unloaded. Concept number one, and this is going to get controversial for some people, and do believe I understand, and feel free to leave me comments about it in the comment section. I'm going to load this empty mag, rack my slide, right? So there's nothing in here. So that's why it looks like this, because it's empty. I'm going to pull out the magazine. I'm going to load now a fully loaded magazine. And the point I'm making here is you can see there, the bullets there. The slide is racked back. So what happens if I pull this slide release? Well, a round gets chambered. If you turn and fire, it's going to fire. That, if you're training at home or anywhere that isn't at the range, I would consider that to be not safe, especially if there's people, dogs, or whatever around. I consider it to be not safe. Having good trigger, muscle memory or not, there's something that I wouldn't do at the house unless I was leaving the house to go out into the world. And then you need to have, I think you should have one in the head, because pulling it and having to rack it, that's precious seconds that you need. All right, so now I'm going to disarm this weapon and make it fully unloaded. The very first rule of thumb is to cut your feeding source off, which will be the loaded magazine. Then you cut out your bullet that's chambered. Now it's fully unloaded. In my mind, this is fully unloaded. No mag in the magazine well, no bullet in the chamber. Fully unloaded. right? Okay, so let me reload this bullet in here so I don't lose it. The last bullet for the 5.7 is kind of hard to load on the PSA Rock. It holds 24, so you got to kind of push it. It's easier to load the 9mm by far, but the last bullet is kind of hard to load. So let's look at now the loaded version. So I have a loaded magazine. I have a gun that's fully unloaded. I'm going to load my fully loaded magazine into an unloaded gun. I'm going to pull the trigger. Nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? Some of you may know, may not know, but in order for, I would consider this safe-ish in the sense that I know that the gun's not going to fire because I didn't rack the slide. And that's why I'm able to pull this firearm without worry of it, going off. It's because I know that there's no bullet racked in the slide. And I know if I heard a racking of the bullet, I know to quickly disarm and discharge, if you will. Disarm, discharge. Right? So, I was at the gun range a couple weeks ago, and I was looking at a group of folks, shooting, and I was just kind of just watching them. Sometimes you watch folks to get ideas on shooting, and just for starters, I changed my grip one more time, so all 4 of these fingers are here now with the other fingers on the pistol grip, and then my thumb is actually forward. So I think this is the best hold. And thanks to the viewer that pointed that out to, take this and move it down with the rest of them. So that actually feels very good. I'll take that back to the range to do a confirmational test. Okay, so I was at the range watching a group of people shoot. They were pretty decent at shooting until one of them, I think it was a 45. He was shooting. A gun didn't lock back. So I knew that it was still chambered, one in the head. But what he did was, let me just go through the reenactment of this to try. So what he did was, this is one in the head, right? So this is live. What he did was he dropped the magazine. Excuse me. He racked the slide. Dropped the magazine, and then passed the gun off to his friend. And I remember thinking to myself, like, whoa, like, that's kind of crazy, yo, because that gun is still loaded. And yeah, this gun is still loaded. And if I went to fire, it's going to fire, mainly because he didn't cut the source of food from the gun. He just ejected a round, but another round went in because it chambered. You don't believe me? What's that? This is a lot of reasons, not the full reasons, but a lot of reasons why, accidental fires happen is because, people don't understand the concept of taking the magazine out and then discharging it and then becoming fully unloaded with no magazine in there. You got to check the slide too, just to make sure fire, nothing's going to happen. From what I've seen here on YouTube and from, reading some of the manuals that I have for the PSA Rock and, just gun safety in general, I know that don't rack the slide. And if you're going to be passing this off to someone else to shoot, you need to, again, load, take out the magazine, then you rack the slide. If there's a bullet in the head, it'll come out and you'll stop all of those problems. So I say all of that to say this, is that I understand fully the mechanisms of how this pistol, I want to emphasize, works. And I'm well aware of how safe slash unsafe this could be. And for me, this is like really safe. Like there's no way for me to fire this round unchambered. The other thing I want to point out is this gun has an internal safety feature. Again, we'll check one more time. I know. But right here in this well is a trigger blade. And this trigger blade functioned as the safety for this firearm, because I'm pulling the trigger without that trigger blade and it won't fire. But if I release that trigger blade, then you see how it fires. But if I don't do it, it won't fire. So that in itself is a safety feature for the gun, one that I wouldn't depend on if I was messing around with a fully loaded gun. I really wouldn't depend on this, even if I have muscle memory on trigger training. I don't do that at home. I would at the range because I'm at the range, but I wouldn't do it at the house. I still will load mags at the house and train because of the weight. There is a drastic difference in the weight and how you would go about shooting or your aim with a loaded versus unloaded magazine. So there is some concepts for me, this is for me on training with a loaded versus unloaded. I do train unloaded, especially when I'm trigger training and trying to pull a slide, rack the slide. I'm going to change out. So I'm going to do one for you here. Let's say that, I was getting ready to shoot. I was shooting, blah, blah, blah. Let me rack the slide. Boom, 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 boom. Rack the slide. Oh, it's empty. Put another mag in. Rack the slide. Get back to work kind of thing. So I'm looking at the camera and doing this. So that's a little awkward. But you get the idea. The idea is that I train pulling the trigger on unloaded magazines, or gun being unloaded. I don't do any training with loaded magazines and fully loaded gun with trigger training unless I'm at the range. Like it's just no point to do it at the house. But I do load train my 5.7 at the house so that I can get that feel, because there is a difference in feel of a loaded mag versus a unloaded mag when you're training. Like the weight's just different. There's a lot that I'm training for, a lot of scenarios that I'm going to be recording here in the future, alongside a lot of the focus stuff that I'm doing, the car stuff that I'm doing, and house stuff that I'm doing. I'm going to be doing a lot more training, tactical training, and just situational training for me being out and about in the world. Like, how do I draw from the car when I have my seatbelt on and I'm left-handed? So those things are kind of interesting that, I didn't think about until recently. Maybe you all haven't thought about it either, but if you have your gun, IWB, and you're driving in the car and you have your seatbelt on and you're left-handed, like, is there anything else you want to add in there? And there's snow outside and your windows are tinted and someone's, that kind of stuff. Is this, how do you get to your gun fast enough to stop a threat? Like, how do you do that? So I'm going to be coming up with scenarios that will allow me to train those types of things at home and or at the range, at the outdoor range for sure. I'll be coming up with those scenarios for you all to kind of go along on that journey with me. But yeah, so that's my understanding. My goodness, this last one's hard to load. So that's my understanding and my reasoning to why I use fully loaded magazines in the magazine well, but I don't chamber it because I really don't need to, and I can't get it to fire unless I rack it. So for me, it's just pretty much safe. Disclaimer: it may or may not be something that you should do at the house. And like I said earlier, if you have a problem with touching the trigger, I don't think that you should be, one, using firearms, or two, playing around with loaded magazines. I think that you need to get this solved first. and get some range time in. Know your weapon, and I think you'll be good. This is coming from someone that is not a firearms instructor. I just kind of happen to get things pretty quickly, and I'm pretty sure that you all do too. So with that, I'm going to leave you with those points, and you can feel free to combat me, throw your hands in the comment section, if you will, and we can kind of go from there. There was a comment that someone made in the last video about how I was holding the firearm. I appreciate that. So I've changed that to this. Now all my fingers are here, and this actually feels pretty good. I still have the wrist lock, so this feels really, 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 really good. So I really appreciate that comment. But I do want to have and preach gun safety. And if you're gonna be training with loaded mags, why? Like, what's the reason for it? There are other options that user or viewer pointed out that I could get, like some steel well caps and to give you the loaded feel. That may be true. I need to look into that, and it may be something I consider in the future. So maybe I don't even need to have loaded magazines when training with my holster at the house. I can just use those steel caps if they have some for 5.7. But anyway, like I said, leave me comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel, help me out, and peace.